So you're new to breeding the American Bully, and you're trying to figure out which route do I go? Do I start with a male? Do I start with a female? And in this video, we're gonna be discussing and comparing the differences between both, and which one, most importantly, is the most important part of any kennels program. So please don't forget to like, comment, and sub to the channel. Check off the bell notification icon to become part of the family. And with that being said, let's get into the video, baby.
Speedy, baby.
Alright everybody, so it's all up to you based on where you want to go. When I started to get into this business and how I went about developing my whole program, my whole philosophy behind the dogs, how to pair them up, outweighing the pros and cons, and that's how in depth I go into evaluating the dogs. I want to go based off the conformation, the breed type, do they hold true to the American Bully look, do they have the bone, the dome, the conformation, the top line, the proper rear assembly, the fronts. I go into extreme depth when evaluating my dogs. So with that being said, what is most important, right? And which one should you start off first? So I would say if you're starting off and you want to get into breeding relatively quickly, start off with the female. Essentially what you could do is, if you want to use a stud, if you have a badass female, and let's say you want to incorporate a stud, you could also do a pup bag deal. So that's how people get their program going right up from the rip. Now I would say there's pros and cons to everything, right? If you start off with a stud and the stud is badass, right? What this does is bring a notoriety to your camp, the owner, right? And basically what you could do is showcase to the world your male and the route you're going with your program. What a lot of people do is they get a badass stud and essentially they just want to stud them out for a quick buck, because let's call it for what it is. The American Bully community is all about a get-rich-quick scheme, and everybody just wants to be able to maximize the amount of profit that they can make based on the money they spent for their dog. But in reality, what ends up happening is you breed your dog, your stud, to an inadequate female, pet quality female. It doesn't matter who that girl has in the pet. If that girl's conformation traits do not add up, doesn't matter what the stud brings to the table, it's very unreasonable to ask that stud to be able to basically bring his look to that girl's body. You get what I'm saying? Because now we're dealing with probability, we're dealing with genetics, you have to deal with conformation. Let's put this into perspective, right? If I have a female with a high rear and my stud has a high rear, and I understand that, but I breed my stud to that female, what do you think is gonna happen with those pups? Higher probability suggests you're gonna have pups with high rears. That's just one example. What ends up happening is when you go this route, and let's say for example, you're just breeding your stud to any female, eventually the productions show. You're building a portfolio for your male, right? But if the productions don't look good, essentially you're burying the stud. So rewinding to what I said earlier, the most important part of the program is the female. Alright everybody, so I apologize for picking up for this moment right here. I actually just dropped my son off for his doctor's appointment, and I completely forgot when looking over the footage to mention examples as to why it's so important to utilize the female and the importance of really utilizing what they bring to the table to bring out the best in the stud, right? So when you have a female that's legit, that she's good to go, let's say you have a high quality female, when you pair her up with a stud, you're gonna bring out the best in that stud, right? Because what you're looking to do is you're looking to double down on good traits that you have, and you also want to add. Now let's say for example you have a female that is not show quality, but she could be used for breed quality. And what does that mean? So for example, let's say you got a girl that's lacking on bone, for example, or doesn't have the best head shape, but she has a great top line, great rear assembly, and her fronts are straight. From there, when you're looking to pair up that girl with a stud, you're looking to bring in bone, right? You're looking to bring in a nice top skull, a nice dome. And now what you want to do is you want to be able to utilize this girl to complement that stud, which means that if that stud has, for example, let's say slightly bold but has, you know, slightly east-west paws, but your girl has straight fronts, straight cat-like paws, chances are when dealing with probability, when you breed them, that girl is probably going to put up some productions that are going to have the combination of both. And that's what you were breeding for and what you were looking for when you were trying to pair up the stud with the female, right? And this is how you go about utilizing female. Instead of it just being so stud reliant and praying that the stud blesses your program with the next big thing, when you have a female that's not worthy to be bred, you have to start looking at your females as complementary pieces to be able to pair up with this male to bring out a better version of that dog, and to ultimately grow your program to having the traits and the foundation that you're looking for so that you can put out your consistent look, right? So progressing forward, right? Let's say I got a girl you know, she has a slight high rear, right? But she has good bone, she has a decent head, you know, she's not as wide, but she has a good stance, kind of like a classic, right? And let's say that she has the hocks turned out when moving, right? Now, some might say this is pet quality. Depends on what you're looking at, right? When I see my girl that has this, I need to understand that the male that I'm utilizing to pair up with this girl has exactly what she needs. You get what I'm saying? Instead of breeding to the height, you need to breed to repair the flaws in your female and in your program. So instead of breeding to a big time stud hoping that they will cure your program, what you need to do is you need to start looking at the standard. You have to start looking at the confirmation and seeing what your girl lacks. Instead of, let's say for example, you bring in a stud that's well known, has everything, but let's say for example has a slight high rear and your girl has a slight high rear. Your pups are gonna have the slight high rear. Nothing gets fixed, and then you double down on a foundational trait, which now is a problem to breed away from, which could take generations. Now, people might say, well, you know what? If I started off with this, you know, everyone starts somewhere, and you want to breed up, right? But the problem with that is it could take you up to 4 generations to get you to where you want to be, when in reality you could have just saved the money and bought 2 pups, for example, from breedings you love that might have ran you a little bit more money. But in the grand scheme of things, you start off your program much more successful and you get it running right off the rip. You get what I'm saying? So going forward, right, when we're evaluating these dogs, we have to stop looking at the male as being a savior for a program and breeding to them because of the height. You have to start realizing that the most important part is your female. Your female is going to be what brings your program over the top, because like I said earlier, if you pair up a female that is badass with a dope stud, that stud's going to be put in a position to outproduce themselves. Most males, a high percentage of them, cannot achieve that. They need good females to work with. So instead of just breeding to breed, we have to actually breed very strategically to really see what we're lacking. That's most important. What are we lacking? How can I create the look that I'm looking for consistently? All right, everybody, so I almost forgot to mention, if you have a dog, let's say for example a male or a female that has been line bred on a certain foundation, you have to understand that sometimes it may not matter what level of stud you use to combine with that female, or the level of female you're combining with your male. If that dog has a certain foundation tied into them for like 4 generations, there's a very high probability that the pups may not be exactly what you want. So that's why it's big when you have a dog to evaluate that ped based on the type of dogs that were in it. You get what I'm saying? Because if you have a dog that's 4 generations with terrier traits in a more narrow frame and lankier frame, it's very difficult to ask a dog that's a heavy bully extreme stud to be able to produce fire with that type of female. You get what I'm saying? And vice versa. So that's another thing you have to look out for. So let's get back into the video. And I would say a lot of people put such a heavy emphasis on the stud without evaluating the female that's being paired up with the stud, because they want to fall into the height, the look, and they just want to say, oh, I got that stud in my program. But what ends up happening to that stud is when you decide you want to put out a litter with that stud and your female is inadequate, if that stud brings out poorer productions than himself, you're going to be disappointed. Well, why are you disappointed? When you didn't truly evaluate your female and said, well, you know what, my female just wasn't worthy to be bred. And we're talking about in the longevity of things, right? We're talking about having a consistent look within the American bully breed. The way you're able to achieve this is by pairing up the best dogs from the best producing dogs to consistently get the look, to get it to where, you know, the line breeding all sinks in the traits that we're looking for to create the best American bully. Now, with that being said, everybody has their preferences, that's fine. But with everything I just said, when you're looking at this stud and you're trying to put such a heavy emphasis on them without really realizing your female, that's a problem. You get a female from a certain camp that just because they have dope dogs in the pet, that girl's worthy to be bred. She's not. That's just what it is. Because when you get disappointing productions, now that person that studded out that dog, everyone's gonna be looking at that stud like, whoa, 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 hold up, why'd you throw that? Why he threw that? He looks like this. And rewinding back to what I said earlier, when you stud out a dog, you put him with inadequate females, you put out poor productions, people are gonna be a little bit more resistant on wanting to use your stud. So how do you go about setting up your dogs, your productions, your stud for success? Now, this is the route I took. I started off with a male. I started off with Ghost, and I looked at him and I just fell in love with him, and I fell in love with the breed. Essentially, my main thing was always dog training. I was a little bit hesitant on getting into breeding, but as I started growing the love for the breed and I started really dissecting the breed, I saw a route to give back to the community what I could through my dog Ghost and through my loyalty with my dog. See, I got into breeding not for the money. I got into breeding to producing the best overall American bullies that I could, especially for the XL community, but to always have my boys' blood around me, because that's loyalty. That's what I stand for. That's one of my principles. I gotta make sure to the day that I die that I got Ghost's blood around me, because I know he's not gonna stay for an extended amount of time. So that's when I got in. Once I started seeing what Ghost had, right, this is how you get away from kennel blindness. I looked at him and said, this is what my boy needs. This is what I think he needs to outproduce himself. So I went on a crazy search looking for a breeding that gave me what I needed, which meant double down on the good that Ghost had, improve on what I needed Ghost to be improved on, and bringing in a little bit more spread, a little bit more of a wider neck, while also keeping the good traits that he had. It took me a while, but I got the female to pair up with him. Now that I have my girl Chanel, she's a titanium tank granddaughter and a grand champion Samson daughter. I know what she has up front. Now when I pair her up with Ghost, she gives him everything that he needs to produce a better version of himself. You get what I'm saying? Now we all know we're dealing with genetics and probability of the things that could come about. I'm aware of that, and that is why we dictate prices based on the quality of the pups, right? Going off of what I'm talking about in this video, Chanel really compliments Ghost, who in my opinion is a really dope XL stud. He's an ABKC champion. He's 25 points away from UKC champion, and I think Ghost has what it takes to compete at a very high level. Pairing him up with a girl like Chanel, who I know just by seeing her every day is gonna be a really dope girl. I know the productions are gonna be really dope. You get what I'm saying? I did the homework, I did the research based off of what I really wanted to incorporate. Get the look, get the confirmation, get the functionality, get the drive, create the overall best American bully that I could. And because of me putting in the time, the research, now I'm setting up my boy Ghost to produce equal production to himself or even better. That is why when you're studying out your male, you have to go the route of selected females and approved females only. You have to go that route because you want to be able to set your stud up in a position to be successful from the rip. So when you start gaining notoriety, people start looking at the productions add up to that stud. Now when you bring in a female to your camp, people are gonna be like this, I want a pup from her. You get what I'm saying? So it goes hand in hand. You have to be smart starting off. So with all of that being said, if there's anything you take away from this video, in our opinion, the female is the most important part of any breeding program. To be able to bring out the best in the productions, to be able to bring out the best in the stud, they need a great female behind them. I hope that this helps you in really determining which route you want to go and how in depth you have to be with your evaluations on the dogs and breedings. And if you have a stud and you are starting up your program with a stud, how to go about building them up the right way to be able to bring notoriety to your camp. And when you bring in that female, people are gonna want pups from that dog because now he's a known producer and he's produced really good dogs with really good females, which means that the pups are highly likely to come out looking dope with the female you're pairing up with them in your camp. So with all of that being said, please don't forget to like, comment, and sub to the channel. Check off the bell notification icon and become part of the family. And with that being said, I'm up and out of here. I hope you enjoyed the video. We'll catch you on the next one.
Speedy, baby.